She wasn't a hero, she was just a golden retriever, walking through the snow before the sun had fully risen. The street was quiet. The world was still half asleep. And then she stopped. Because in the cold dawn, something small was fading fast, unseen by everyone else. What she carried home that morning would test faith, compassion, and where love truly belongs. If you believe miracles can come through the most unexpected souls, stay with us. And if this story touches your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories of hope. Snow fell thick and slow over the quiet American suburb, swallowing sound and distance, turning streets and houses into pale silhouettes beneath a winter sky. Willow felt the cold first through her paws. The snow was deeper than usual, packed unevenly by last night's wind, crunching softly beneath her weight. She was a full-grown golden retriever, nearly 6 years old, strong and broad through the shoulders, her coat a warm honey gold dulled by winter frost. Snow clung to the long fur along her legs and belly, melting slowly against her body heat. Her muzzle showed faint silver around the edges, a mark of years spent waiting faithfully rather than age alone. She had walked this road countless times. This morning was no different until it was. Willow slowed without knowing why at first. The leash trailed loosely behind her, dragging faint lines across the snow. Her ears lifted, rotating as she caught something beneath the silence. Not a sound, exactly. More like an absence where sound should have been. She stopped, her breath fogged in short, steady bursts. The air smelled clean and sharp, but beneath it lingered something wrong. Warmth where there should be none. Milk. Fear. Willow lowered her head, nose brushing the snow. Her heart began to beat faster, not with panic, but with recognition. Instinct rose inside her, ancient and undeniable. She stepped off the sidewalk. The snow rose to her chest as she pushed forward, muscles working, breath deepening. Ahead, a small cluster of leafless shrubs bent under the weight of fresh snowfall. Their thin branches trembled in the wind, whispering softly. Then she saw it. A tiny shape lay half buried beneath the branches, so still it might have been mistaken for a fallen leaf. Willow froze, every muscle locking in place. Her eyes widened as she moved closer, carefully, reverently. A newborn puppy, golden like her, but so small it seemed impossible. Its fur was pale and wet, clumped against its fragile body. Its eyes were sealed shut, muzzle barely formed, chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. The puppy trembled violently, its thin limbs twitching weakly, as if struggling to remember how to exist in the cold. Willow's breath caught. She circled once, then lowered her body, blocking the wind with her own. Her tail curled protectively around the tiny form. She leaned forward and licked the puppy's head, slow and deliberate, warmth passing from her tongue to its skin. The puppy stirred faintly, but made no sound. There was no scent of a mother nearby. Willow lifted her head and searched the air. Nothing. No warmth pressed into the snow. No familiar presence. Only faint human footprints leading away from the shrubs, already softening, already disappearing beneath falling flakes. Something tightened inside her chest. Willow nudged the puppy gently, urging it closer. Her body curved instinctively, sheltering it. She had guarded many things in her life: homes, doorways, a grieving man's sleep. But this was different. This was smaller, more fragile, and somehow heavier. The puppy's trembling worsened. Willow knew then. She slid her muzzle beneath the tiny body, lifting carefully, adjusting her grip until the puppy rested securely between her jaws. She held it as lightly as she could, aware of every breath, every movement. The puppy pressed instinctively into the warmth, its small body curling slightly, trusting without knowing why. Willow turned. The road stretched ahead, pale and empty, leading back toward the familiar shape of home. Snow blew harder now, stinging against her eyes. She took her first step forward, then another, moving faster as urgency tightened her stride. Behind her, the shrubs shuddered in the wind. The puppy shifted once in her mouth, then went still again, its breath faint but present. Willow's ears flattened slightly as she moved, guarding both against the cold and against the unknown weight pressing at her back. Halfway down the street, she slowed. Something felt different. The wind changed direction, sharper, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of another human. Fresh, close. Willow's muscles tensed, but she did not turn around. Her focus remained forward, toward the house waiting at the end of the road. Snow swept across the pavement, erasing her paw prints almost as soon as they formed. At the far end of the street, where the white road blurred into falling sky, a figure emerged, just a shape at first, tall, motionless. Willow felt it more than she saw it, the faint shift in the world behind her, the quiet awareness of being watched. Her pace quickened, paws digging into the snow as she carried the puppy toward warmth, toward safety. The figure did not move closer. It simply stood there, half hidden by the storm, watching as Willow disappeared down the road, leaving behind only drifting snow and the last fading trace of footprints. The house smelled of wood smoke and old memories when Caleb stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots and closing the door against the wind. Willow did not wait for him. She crossed the living room with steady purpose and lowered the newborn puppy onto the worn rug in front of the fireplace. The flames crackled softly, throwing orange light across the walls. The puppy lay still for a moment, its tiny chest fluttering, then released a weak shiver as warmth reached its skin. Caleb stood a few steps away, unmoving. He was a man who liked distance between himself and neighbors, between himself and difficult choices. At 46, he carried his height awkwardly, shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller. His dark hair, cut short and practical, was threaded heavily with gray. A thick beard framed his angular face, but it did little to hide the tired lines beneath his eyes. Those eyes had learned restraint after his wife's death, learning how not to hope too quickly, how not to attach to anything that might vanish without warning. He had not planned for this morning. Caleb removed his coat slowly, folding it over the chair by the door. His hands shook slightly as he knelt beside the rug. Up close, the puppy looked impossibly fragile. Its fur was still damp in places, clinging to translucent skin. Its ears were sealed flat against its head, its nose barely larger than a fingertip. "This isn't—" Caleb stopped himself. He had started to say, "This isn't my responsibility," but the words felt thin the moment they formed. Willow sat beside the puppy, her body angled protectively. Her dark eyes never left Caleb's face. There was no panic in them, only resolve. She had made her choice already. Caleb exhaled slowly. He reached out, hesitated, then touched the puppy with the back of his finger. The warmth surprised him. The life surprised him. He stood abruptly and crossed the kitchen, pulling a clean towel from a drawer. He wrapped it gently around the puppy, careful not to startle it. The puppy twitched, but did not cry. Caleb noticed that and felt something tighten in his chest. "You're a quiet one," he murmured. Willow leaned closer, pressing her nose against the towel as if approving the gesture. Caleb moved on instinct after that. He warmed water, soaked a cloth, and carefully wiped snow and dirt from the puppy's skin. He searched online with shaking fingers, reading quickly, skimming advice meant for emergencies. His mind worked faster than his heart wanted to. He was not a man who believed in signs. He believed in cause and effect, in planning, in minimizing risk. But as he sat on the floor, watching Willow curl her body around the tiny bundle, he felt something shift inside him. The house had been silent for too long. Caleb glanced at the calendar on the wall. December. He swallowed and looked back at the puppy. "Noel," he said quietly, testing the name. It felt fragile, temporary-like, something you gave without promising it would last. Willow's tail thumped once against the rug. Noel stirred, releasing a faint sound that barely reached the air. Caleb froze, then let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He adjusted the towel, ensuring the puppy stayed warm. Outside, snow continued to fall, thick and unrelenting. The windows blurred into white, hiding the street beyond. Caleb did not see the faint shadow past the front of the house, pausing just long enough to look toward the lighted windows before moving on. Inside, Willow lay perfectly still, her breathing slow and deep. She had positioned herself so that Noel rested against her chest, shielded from every draft. Caleb watched her, struck by the certainty in her posture. "You're not asking," he said softly to her. "You're telling me." He leaned back against the couch, rubbing his face with both hands. Fear crept in quietly. The fear of attachment, of responsibility, of what would happen if someone came looking. He thought of the footprints Willow had left behind, already erased. He thought of choices made too late. Caleb looked at Noel again. "Just for tonight," he whispered, though the words felt hollow even as he said them. Willow did not move. Morning light crept slowly through the frost-lined windows, pale and uncertain, touching the living room in quiet layers. Noel survived the first night. That fact alone felt unreal to Caleb. He stood in the doorway of the living room just after dawn, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the small bundle rise and fall against Willow's chest. The puppy's breathing was steadier now, not strong, but present, real. A thin sound escaped him occasionally, something between a sigh and a question, as if his body were still deciding whether to stay. Willow had not moved all night. She lay curled on her side on the rug, her golden body forming a careful barrier between Noel and the rest of the world. Her head rested low, chin nearly touching the towel-wrapped puppy. Every few minutes, she adjusted her position by inches, responding to movements Caleb could barely see. Her eyes, usually soft and patient, now carried a constant alertness, as if she expected something to be taken away. Caleb recognized that feeling. Over the next days, routine returned in fragments. Not the old routine, the quiet, controlled solitude he had built for himself, but a fragile new one shaped around warmth and waiting. He learned how to prepare milk replacer, how to hold Noel upright so the liquid wouldn't choke him. His large hands, once clumsy with anything delicate, grew careful, measured. Noel gained strength slowly, his skin pinked beneath thinning fur, his body warming faster each day. He learned to press himself toward Willow instinctively, tiny paws kneading weakly against her chest. Willow responded by lowering her head, licking his face with infinite patience, as though each touch reaffirmed something essential. The house changed with them. It began with sound, the soft clicking of Willow's nails as she followed Noel's movements, the faint squeak of the puppy's voice as he protested hunger or cold. Caleb found himself listening for those sounds even when they stopped, alert in a way he hadn't been in years. At night, he slept lightly on the couch, unwilling to leave them alone. He told himself it was temporary, just until Noel was stable, just until he figured out what came next. But each morning, doubt crept in quietly. Caleb caught himself smiling once while watching Willow teach Noel how to nudge forward with his nose. The expression startled him. He looked away, uneasy, as if he had been caught doing something reckless. "Why you?" he murmured one afternoon, crouched near the rug. He wasn't sure whether he was speaking to Noel or to Willow, or to himself. Willow lifted her head and met his gaze. Her eyes held no answer, only a calm insistence that felt heavier than any argument. By the 5th day, Noel's eyes remained sealed, but his movements grew purposeful. He wriggled with surprising determination, protesting loudly when Caleb delayed feeding. Willow responded by placing a gentle paw across his back, anchoring him with steady pressure. That same afternoon, Caleb noticed the silence outside. The snowfall had stopped overnight. The world beyond the windows looked deceptively clean, smooth, untouched. Caleb pulled on his coat and stepped outside for the first time since Noel's arrival. Cold air bit into his lungs. Near the shrubs at the edge of the street, something dark caught his eye. Caleb walked closer, boots sinking into softening snow. There, half buried but unmistakable, lay a thin strip of worn leather. A collar, small, new, no name engraved yet, only a cheap metal clasp still shining faintly. His stomach tightened. The collar had not been there before, or maybe it had, and he hadn't wanted to see it. Caleb crouched and lifted it carefully, brushing snow from the surface. The leather was supple, barely used. This was not something discarded after years. This was meant for a beginning. Noel had belonged to someone. Caleb stood slowly, the weight of the realization pressing against his ribs. He scanned the street, suddenly aware of how exposed it felt, of how easy it would be for someone to retrace steps once the storm passed. Inside, Willow sensed the change the moment he returned. She rose halfway, positioning herself between Noel and the doorway, muscles tense but silent. Her gaze fixed on Caleb's hand. He held the collar out, palm open. Willow stared at it, unmoving. "It was outside," Caleb said quietly, "near where you found him." Willow lowered her head, nostrils flaring. She did not growl. She did not retreat. Instead, she stepped forward and pressed her nose briefly to the collar, then turned back to Noel, placing herself squarely between the puppy and the world beyond. The message was unmistakable. Caleb sank onto the floor, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. He looked from the collar to Noel, then to Willow. The peace he had allowed himself to believe in suddenly felt borrowed, fragile, temporary. Someone might come. Someone might knock on his door and demand what Willow had chosen without asking. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. He thought of footprints in the snow, of storms that erased intention as easily as evidence. He thought of how quiet the house had been before Noel arrived. When he opened his eyes, Willow was watching him closely, waiting, not for permission, but for resolve. Outside, the snow continued to melt, revealing what the storm had hidden. The knock came just after noon, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the quiet that had settled over the house. Caleb froze where he stood. He had been in the kitchen, rinsing a bottle, listening to the soft rhythm of Willow's breathing from the living room. Noel slept curled against her chest, wrapped in the same towel, his small body rising and falling with a new steadiness. For a moment, Caleb wondered if he had imagined the sound. Then the knock came again. Willow lifted her head instantly. Her body stiffened, ears angling toward the door. She did not bark. She did not move toward it. She simply stood, placing herself fully between Noel and the front of the house. Caleb's pulse quickened. He wiped his hands slowly on a dish towel and walked to the door. Through the frosted glass, he could make out the faint outline of a person standing on the porch. Slender, still. When he opened the door, cold air rushed in. The woman standing there looked barely older than 30. She was thin, too thin for winter. Her shoulders narrow beneath a worn coat that had once been dark, but was now faded and fraying at the cuffs. Strands of chestnut hair escaped from beneath a knitted hat, clinging to her pale face. Her skin was dry and reddened by cold, her lips cracked. But it was her eyes that held Caleb's attention. Dark, sunken, and fiercely alert, as if exhaustion had sharpened them rather than dulled them. "My name is Nora," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I think you have my puppy." Caleb felt the words land before he could prepare for them. He did not answer immediately. He studied her posture, the way she stood with her weight evenly balanced, hands clenched at her sides, as if bracing herself against refusal. She did not look like someone who wandered aimlessly. She looked like someone who had walked with purpose through snow and doubt to reach this door. "I found him outside," Caleb said finally. "He was alone." Nora swallowed. Her gaze flicked past him, into the house, then back again. "I lost him during the storm. I didn't abandon him." Her voice tightened on the last word. Caleb stepped aside, instinctively, opening the door wider. The warmth from inside spilled onto the porch. Nora hesitated only a second before stepping in. The moment she crossed the threshold, Willow growled. It was low, controlled, nothing like fear. Nora stopped. Willow stood squarely in front of the rug, her body tense, head lowered slightly, teeth just visible. Her eyes locked on Nora, unblinking. She had never growled like this before. Not at strangers, not at delivery drivers, not even at loud neighbors. This was different. This was a line drawn. Nora's breath caught. She raised her hands slowly, palms open. "I'm not here to hurt him," she said softly, though her eyes never left the bundle on the floor. "I just want my dog." Caleb moved instinctively closer to Willow, not touching her, but aligning himself beside her. "He's not well enough to be moved," he said. "He's only just stabilizing." Nora shook her head. "He needs me." Her composure cracked then, just slightly. Her shoulders sagged, and exhaustion slipped through the control she'd been holding. "I've been sleeping in a church basement," she continued. "They made us leave during the storm. I wrapped him in my scarf. I thought I'd come back in an hour." Her voice broke. "The roads were blocked. When I returned, he was gone." Silence stretched between them. Caleb looked at her hands. They were raw, fingers chapped and red. Hands that had carried something small through cold. He believed her, not because her story was perfect, but because it wasn't. Willow growled again, deeper this time. Nora flinched but did not step back. Instead, she knelt slowly on the floor, keeping her distance. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks, unchecked. "Please," she whispered. "I don't have much, but he's mine." Noel stirred at the sound of her voice. A faint noise escaped him, thin, questioning. Nora gasped. She reached out instinctively, then stopped herself, fingers curling into her palm. Her breath shook as she stared at the puppy. Caleb felt caught between two truths, both pressing against his chest. Willow lowered her head further, placing a paw protectively across Noel's back. "No," Caleb said quietly, though he wasn't sure who he was saying it to. "We're not deciding anything right now." Nora looked up at him, eyes blazing through tears. "You don't get to decide whether I lose him again." Willow's growl did not waver. The room felt too small for all of them. Outside, wind rattled the windows, as if reminding them how easily things could be taken away. 3 lives stood locked in place, none willing to step aside. The snow outside had begun to soften, retreating into thin gray patches along the curb. But inside the house, nothing eased. Nora sat at the edge of the armchair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Up close, the toll of the past months showed clearly. She was 29, though hardship had etched extra years into her face. Her frame was slim, almost fragile, shoulders slightly rounded, as if she had learned to make herself smaller in public spaces. Her chestnut hair, once likely thick and long, was now unevenly cut, pulled back with a fraying elastic. Beneath the exhaustion, her features were gentle high cheekbones, a narrow nose, but her eyes carried a sharpness born from survival. She spoke slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "I didn't plan to keep a dog," Nora said. "I didn't plan any of this." Caleb stood near the window, arms crossed, listening without interruption. He had not sat down since she arrived. His posture remained guarded, weight shifting from one foot to the other, as if staying still might force him to decide too soon. Nora told her story in pieces. How she had worked at a diner until it closed. How medical bills from an untreated infection had drained what little savings she had. How shelters were full, rules strict, time limited. She described nights spent riding buses until morning, mornings spent pretending she was headed somewhere important. "Noel was born under a loading dock," she said quietly. "His mother didn't survive the cold." Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "I kept him hidden, wrapped him in my scarf. He slept against my chest." She pressed a hand to herself unconsciously. "When the storm came, the church basement made us leave. I thought I could come back. I thought—" Her breath hitched. "I thought I had time." Willow lay on the rug, her body curved tightly around Noel. The puppy slept, unaware of the weight his existence carried. Willow's ears twitched with every change in tone, every rise in tension. She did not relax for a moment. Caleb finally turned. "You knew you couldn't care for him," he said, not accusing, but firm. Nora met his gaze without flinching. "I knew I couldn't give him comfort," she replied, "but I could give him love." The words landed harder than Caleb expected. He thought of Willow, standing in the snow without hesitation. He thought of his own careful distance from everything that mattered. Love had never been efficient or safe. "I wasn't asking anyone to save us," Nora continued. "I just needed him to live." Silence followed. Willow shifted then, rising halfway and repositioning herself so Noelle was pressed even closer to her chest. Her movements were deliberate, protective. She placed her head low, eyes fixed on Nora, not hostile, but unyielding. Nora noticed. "I see her," she said softly. "She's his protector." Willow did not growl this time. She simply stayed where she was. Caleb rubbed a hand over his beard, frustration tightening his jaw. "If you take him now," he said, "he could die." "And if I lose him," Nora replied, voice breaking at last, "I don't know what I become." The room felt heavy with unsaid things. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing against wet pavement. Life continued, indifferent. Caleb felt the familiar pull of logic. He could call animal services. He could insist on proof of ownership. He could close the door on this complication and return to his controlled solitude. Every option came with consequences, but only one felt easy. That was what unsettled him most. He knelt slowly beside her, resting his forearm on his knee. "You're afraid," he murmured, though he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to Willow or to himself. Willow's tail did not move. Nora wiped her cheeks with the back of her sleeve, embarrassed by the tears. "I'm not asking you to trust me forever," she said, "just long enough for me to stand again." Caleb closed his eyes briefly. Images surfaced: unbidden hospital corridors, unanswered phone calls, the moment he realized his wife was gone. He remembered how it felt to be offered kindness when he least deserved it, and how he had nearly refused it out of pride. When he opened his eyes, Willow was watching him closely, her body tense with readiness. The snow outside continued to melt, revealing dark ground beneath. Footprints appeared where none had been visible before, reminders that nothing stayed hidden for long. Inside the house, kindness hovered at its breaking point, balanced between fear and faith. The decision did not arrive all at once. It unfolded quietly in the space between breaths. Caleb stood at the kitchen counter long after the conversation had stalled, staring at nothing. Outside, the last of the snow slid from the roof in soft, heavy clumps, revealing the dull brown of winter grass beneath. The storm that had brought Noel into his life was gone. What remained was choice clearer now, unavoidable. He turned back to the living room. Nora sat on the floor this time, no longer pretending distance would help her case. Her posture had softened, exhaustion replacing defiance. Without the tension hardening her shoulders, she looked younger, vulnerable, a woman worn thin not by bad decisions, but by too many impossible ones. Her hands rested open on her knees, empty. Willow lay opposite her, still guarding Noelle, but the rigid line in her body had eased. She watched both humans carefully, amber eyes alert, reading something neither of them spoke aloud. Caleb cleared his throat. "There's a shelter downtown," he said. "Not an animal one, a transitional program. They help people get back on their feet." Nora looked up slowly. Suspicion flickered across her face. She had learned what help often cost. "I've tried," she said. "There are waiting lists, rules." "I know," Caleb replied. "I can make a call." That surprised both of them. Caleb explained haltingly at first, then with growing steadiness that his late wife had once volunteered with a local outreach group, that after her death he had avoided the place entirely, as if walking through its doors might reopen wounds he had barely stitched closed. He still had the director's number. He had never deleted it. "This doesn't fix everything," he said, "but it's a start." Nora's eyes filled again, but this time she did not wipe the tears away. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Caleb considered the question carefully. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't ask," he said. "And because this," he gestured gently toward Noel, "isn't a problem that needs winning." Silence settled, different from before, lighter. They waited together as Caleb made the call. When he hung up, his shoulders dropped slightly, as if he had set something down at last. "There's space," he said. "Temporary, counseling, work placement." Nora let out a shaky breath that sounded like it had been held for months. The moment came quietly after that. Caleb knelt beside Willow. Noel slept, warm and content, unaware of the future shifting around him. Caleb did not reach for the puppy. Instead, he rested his hand on Willow's shoulder. She understood. Willow leaned down and carefully nudged Noel awake. The puppy stirred, releasing a soft sound, then blinked blindly. Willow adjusted her grip, lifting him with the same gentleness she had shown in the snow days ago. She turned not toward Caleb, but toward Nora. Nora's breath caught. She did not move at first, afraid to break something fragile. Willow stepped forward and lowered Noel into her waiting hands. The transfer was slow, deliberate. This was not surrender. Willow held her gaze until Noel was fully supported, until Nora's arms curved protectively around the small body. Then Willow stepped back, watching closely, ready, but not resisting. Nora pressed her face briefly against Noel's head, shoulders shaking. "I won't fail him," she whispered. It was a promise, not a plea. Caleb watched Willow settle beside them, not retreating, not clinging. Trust, he realized, was not absence of fear. It was choosing to place something precious where it might grow. Weeks later, winter loosened its grip. Snow vanished from sidewalks. Buds appeared on bare branches. Nora moved into the program's small shared housing, checking in often, bringing Noel by whenever she could. Caleb helped with rides, paperwork, quiet encouragement. Willow waited by the door each time, tail wagging when Noel returned, calm when he left. Noel grew stronger, louder, curious, and each of them, in their own way, found something they had been missing. Not a possession, not a victory, but a place where they were no longer alone. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, through a loyal heart, an open door, and the courage to choose kindness when fear feels easier. If you believe in God, you may recognize this truth. He often works through ordinary moments, using ordinary people and even animals to answer prayers we never knew how to speak. In our daily lives, we pass crossroads like this more often than we think. A chance to help, a chance to trust, a chance to let compassion lead instead of control. When we choose love, we create space for God's grace to move, softly, steadily, and right on time. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment with your thoughts or a prayer. Your words may be someone else's miracle. And subscribe to the channel so we can keep telling stories that remind us we are never alone. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and guide your steps with peace. Amen.